Welcome, everybody. My name is Ashley Winters, as Sarah just let you know, and I am the Managing Artistic Director of Opera Kansas. And we are thrilled to be here with our wonderful senior friends at the Wichita Public Library. I was just mentioning to Sarah before we got started that it popped up on my Facebook memories that we were actually there with you at the Advanced Learning Library 2 years ago this week doing our Songs to the Moon program. And it's just wonderful to be able to be back with you. Even though we're having to do things a little bit differently still, we are getting back to it. So Opera Kansas is thrilled that our return from the pandemic is to present to our Wichita community and to the world this brand new opera called Staggerwing. And in 2019, we hosted a competition called the Zepick Modern Opera Competition. And this was the third time that we had done this. If any of you have seen Beneath Suspicion from 2016 or Mr. Brewster's Invigorating Invention from 2018, this is the 2020 winner. And this competition was a little structured a little differently than it had been in the past. We decided that we wanted to commission a brand new work, as in we requested ideas, not finished pieces of music, not things that had already been written or presented elsewhere, something that was an idea, something that was from scratch. And we had 115 submissions from people all over the world. And I tell this story frequently, but I think it's important because I had nothing to do with choosing the winner, but I had everything to do with organizing when all the submissions came in. And the very first night when this submission came across my email, I read the proposal and I went, oh, this one's going to win. And several weeks later, after a large committee of people, people from all over Wichita, various and sundry artists and community people, they agreed with me that that this should be the winner. And the reason why for us was that this story spoke to us as being members of this Wichita community, of being all of us, the airplanes fly over our head all the time. And so we're all a little bit of aviation nuts. And so it seemed to speak our story. And we are so excited that even though we were supposed to do this last September, now is the time, and we are here and we're making it happen. So this is the first event that we are doing in this week, in these 2 weeks prior to the world premiere of Staggerwing. We are going to visit with you, and we're going to hear from Rachel and Lisa about why they chose this story, how it came to be. But in case you are interested in wanting to come and see the world premiere, this opera will be presented next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, July 30th, 31st, and August 1st at the Kansas Aviation Museum. So it's a different kind of environment, but all of our people that feature in this show have walked those halls, have been there, landed their planes at the Kansas, or what was or is now the Kansas Aviation Museum, which used to be the Wichita Terminal. And so we're very excited to bring this opera alive in living history. And so if you are interested in tickets for Staggerwing, please visit operakansas.org. Tickets are available there. And let's hear then about the story. So Rachel and Lisa, I'm going to let you take it away from this point. And we have a couple of questions that we've had submitted to us. But first of all, I would love to hear why. Why did you choose to do this? Why did you choose Opera Kansas's competition? Why did you choose how to make this work? And what inspired you? All those good questions for origin story.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for having us here. Rachel, why don't you start in? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to preemptively apologize. There is a rooster outside that's been making some noise. I don't know why people in Brooklyn have roosters, but our neighbors do. So sorry if that gets in the way, but I can't do anything about it. Anyway, hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here with Lisa and with Opera Kansas. We are having a great time and we're so excited to finally see this come to life. So to take it back to the very beginning, Lisa and I started working together in 2018, and we had a premiere of a short opera at Utah Opera called No Ladies in the Ladies Book. And following the success of that, we were really, really excited to find another way to work together. And this opportunity happened to present itself. And so, of course, we jumped right on it. Being as the opera company is located in Wichita, it was very important for us to find a story that was meaningful to the local audience that was going to see it, of course. So that's one part of it. The other part is that we are both very interested in putting women's stories front and center. So in my research, since my role as the librettist is to try to shape the story and put those words on the page for Lisa to eventually set them, I was looking for things for women's stories particular to Kansas and hopefully also Wichita, during which point I learned that Wichita was a major hub of aviation, which is a subject I really honestly, sorry to say, didn't know anything about until I've flown in planes before, but they get me from point A to point B, and I don't think a whole lot about it. And so it was great to actually have a chance to sit with the technicalities of that and learn the history of it and learn how integral Wichita was to the development of that field and to that technology, and also putting women at the fore of the field. And there were so very many. And so I was looking for women in Kansas, and the story of Olive Ann Beech actually jumped out to me first. And I just thought that her personality and the story of how she became an important figure in aviation in Kansas was so interesting. And I read about the Beechcraft Staggerwing, and the word Staggerwing just popped out to me. And I said, Lisa, this has to be the title. I don't know what the story is, but we are going to figure out what Staggerwing is all about.
Yeah,
So,
let me jump in for a quick.
yeah.
I remember that phone call. You had it. You were like Staggerwing, and it was that moment that you look for as creative team when you go, yes, put a pin in it. That's it. That speaks to us both. That's it. So I just remember that call when you were like, we're calling the opera Staggerwing, and I'm like, yes.
Right. So of course I had to learn more about what the Staggerwing was and why that was a special plane, and then the fact that it was featured in this Bendix race that happened to be, it was won by these two incredibly famous pilots who had really intriguing and moving journeys of their own, in their quest to become pilots in the first place, but also to win this race and many others, and what aviation meant to them as as citizens of Wichita and various places, but also as members of the aviation community, and especially the female aviators community.
I want to jump in and just put a point to me when we were talking about creating the story that we wanted to tell. Ashley put out a call. Part of this 2020, or part of the Zepick call, was to create a work that the unexamined life is not worth living, and that was the mission that we took on. And then we looked specifically at the heroes within the Wichita community, because for me, so many people know about like Amelia Earhart and the great big famous names, but for me as a composer, especially in a theatrical situation, I want to tell the story of ordinary people who do extraordinary things. So when we took that call of the life unexamined, and then we really said, well, who are these heroes within the Wichita community that are the unsung heroes that did extraordinary things? And that just helped us focus on Olive Ann, who at a time when women were not in positions of power, she had the opportunity to advocate and make change for all of us, which she did for Louise and Blanche. And that's a story worth celebrating.
And I should also just say that all of these women who were flying at this time deserve their own operas. Like, if we had unlimited time and unlimited resources, there are so many great stories. And if anything, as Lisa knows, because she had to read my many drafts, it was very hard to focus on the things that were the most important because there were so many beautiful details and anecdotes and other things. It was so easy to get distracted by all of the shiny, interesting tidbits of information that was out there. There's really an embarrassment of riches when it comes to this topic and when it comes to the lives of these women as well.
There are hundreds of operas with extraordinary stories, and some of them quite dramatic and tragic. And I hope people who come and see Staggerwing, or even folks today, as you leave us, you're like curious to know more, because these stories are part of our American story. They come out of Wichita. I say to you, we all as Americans should honor what these stories are, please. They're so amazing.
And I think it's also our job as creators in a theatrical and artistic medium is to take these really big subjects and make them very personal. And if we've done our job right, that's what we've done here. There was so much to winnow down in terms of the technology that was happening at the time and the way that the field changed according to these technological innovations, and the facts and figures of what it means to be a pilot and how to get a plane from one side of the country to another is in the first place. There's so much to be said about that, and it's much better and more interestingly told through the eyes of these characters who had these very personal connections to this trip and to fly in general. What else am I forgetting, Lisa? So much. There's so many things.
I think you're doing amazing. If there's anybody that, Ashley, I would open it to you and say, do you want to steer us towards something? Are there any questions? Please,
yes. Yes. Okay. So we've established, why don't you talk about who all of our characters are in our show? We briefly touched on it, just, little bits, but if you could explain, who we have singing for us, character wise, I think our audience would probably enjoy hearing about that.
Sure. Do you want me to take this one, Lisa? Or...
I do. And then I will come back and talk about the musical
yes,
voice of these people.
Yes. So our two main pilots are Louise Thaden and Blanche Noyes, who had previously competed against each other in other races, but they were brought together for this race. And it was a formidable combination indeed. Louise had aspirations to fly from the time she was very young, and she stood on the roof with an umbrella and jumped down to see if she could fly. And Blanche separately had a budding career as an actress and was all set to go to Hollywood until at a fateful party, she met Dewey Noyes, who was an airmail pilot who convinced her not only to fall in love with him, but to become a pilot herself, which is, I think, is such a beautiful story and one that we do explore in the opera. And so these are the two women that we focus on, and we have flashbacks to Olive Ann, of course, and her husband Walter Beech, who ran Beechcraft, and we look at the backstory of how they ended up recruiting Louise and Blanche to get into that plane in the first place as advertising for their new model of plane. So they figure prominently. Obviously, they are rooting for those women to make it across the country in record time and at record speed. And there are other folks who play cameo roles as well. I mean, we do spend some time with Dewey, as I said. Also, a very important inspirational figure in Louise's life was her father, Roy. So they have a very touching moment where she tells him that she's going to be a pilot, and we can talk a little bit about that moment later on. Who am I forgetting? There are other people. There are, teachers, and there Bill Royal, who is sort of the MC who ties it all together, because he is actually following this contest as a radio announcer and is telling the public exactly what is going on in real time. And the fun thing about Bill Royal is that he was a former teacher of Louise's as well. He had a career in Hollywood and in radio. But he was also a pilot himself, so he knew the ins and outs of this pretty well. I think those are our main folks. And
who ran Travel Air that sent her off? Who was the Cole? Louise's boss?
Oh, J.H. Turner.
There we go.
Yep. Who was the one who said, you know what? You should not be selling coal oil anymore. We need to get you into a plane. And the
And
rest
he
is
was from Wichita.
he was in Wichita.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Beech Turner.
So with knowing who all of our characters are, Lisa, why don't you start telling us, what does this opera sound like? Does this opera sound like Wagner? Does this opera sound like Mozart? What does this opera sound like? And that's a big question.
It is a big question, and it's hard to articulate. It's better if you hear it. That's the one disadvantage I have as a composer. But one of the things that made me really excited about writing for Opera Kansas is the Midwest has a very specific tradition that is an American sound, the territory bands. I'm a jazz musician, and my first switch from being a classical musician to being a jazz musician was Count Basie. And he ran a territory jazz band that played here in the Midwest. This is coming out of Benny Moten. I just love the jazz swing, and the fact that the Midwest was this, this is where this territory band grew. So it's very different. So it's jazz, and it's danceable, and it's melodic, and it's rhythmic. There's a bit of Tin Pan Alley American songbook. At the time in the 1930s, you would get these singers that would sing the Beatles, like Bing Crosby, Pennies from Heaven, the Great American Songbook. But the real music of that time period were these bands that would go around and play dances, and it was very blues based, and it was based on a riff. So and Pennsylvania 6-5,000. I mean, so this whole opera was a wonderful moment for me to take this music that is so part of my language, my passion, and I care greatly about the American sound. I, as a composer, care about telling American stories and really taking the boundaries of our American language, which is so rich, and learning how to put it on a stage and never lose the swing, never lose the nature of our American identity. So to take this Glenn Miller, to take Benny Moten, to take all those rhythms and those ideas of the riff and of the blues and of the bop swing, and to put it into an opera voice that has a bit more of a power to it and bring in song. That's what this is all about. So I just am so honored to be able to tell this story about local heroes in the language of their world of 1936. It's a beautiful, rich musical language. So come and see it. I think you'll swing and sing.
And textually too, we have Yip Harburg collaborating with Harold Arlen at that time. We have Cole Porter, we have the Gershwins. So there's really no shortage of beautiful models of songwriting and lyric structures to pull from for inspiration.
So Opera Kansas is particularly excited about featuring something that's so new and so different. You're not going to come across jazz opera very much. And that's part of what Opera Kansas is here for, is that we like to do things that are a little bit unusual, a little bit different, both old and new. I mean, there is old music or music from the 16 and 1700s that doesn't get performed very often. And every now and then we like to pull out little zingers. And this is one to add to the collection. We've really enjoyed rehearsing with this music. We're just getting started on some of our full cast rehearsals upcoming soon, but we're delighted to, I guess what my next question is, or what next thing I'd like to explain to our guests here today is, how do you build something from the bottom up? Like, what is it? So on the Opera Kansas side, when we were choosing the winner of this competition, everybody had to submit both, a snippet, whether it was audio or written out, and we could play it ourselves. It was a snippet of sound, and that's part of Dr. Zepick's, one of his directives was that he wanted our audience to be able to leave the performance essentially being able to hum or whistle a tune or have an earworm from the music. So I still remember what this proposal's earworm was, and it has now turned into On Wild Wings. And
Yes.
So yes.
That's
So
right.
we have these moments that are transcendent. So my question then is, what makes you choose that? And then what inspired you for earworms? What inspired you to make motives or thoughts that would depict a 1936 Staggerwing C-17 flying in the air?
No.
How do we translate that to the stage?
It's, this is something I love to talk about, and I will talk about forever. So cut me off. This is the passion of my life. I believe that there is a rich musical language, and music causes us to feel. It's almost like it's the quick magic superpower. How many times do you feel one way, like you have a bad day and you're not feeling well, and you put on Louis Armstrong and you can't stop feeling joy? Or you're feeling stressed and you put on a Bach cello suite and immediately you calm down. So music to me is this incredible power that has an ability to somehow mystically enact with us and change our emotions. Well, as a composer, being attuned to that, I have made it my mission to understand emotion. And how do I take a melody? And how do I take a rhythm? And how do I take a harmony, the basic building blocks, tempo? And then I ask myself, what do these things cause us to feel as a listener emotionally? And then when I'm given a dramatic situation, I really want to know what the characters are feeling. And then I try to just get my analytical brain out of the way and feel. And I'm just like, let go. So that moment of Wild Wings, I'm asking myself, we have a very stressful opening as they take off in the start of the race, which I think everybody in the audience will understand as a high tense motion. It's got a lot of boom, 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 boom energy that's moving us forward. But the minute they clear the clouds, you have a moment. Everybody, you remember when like you lift off in a plane, or you have a moment when you go, oh, that is so beautiful. I spend a lot of time asking myself, what does that sound like? And I try to find all the musical elements to create it so that when it happens on stage, it just feels authentic. There's actually a moment that I feel like becomes so breathtaking in the score that Louise and Blanche actually lose the capacity to sing anymore. And Ashley, you probably know what it is. It's just a chord. Where I try to use silence instead of trying to superimpose. It's like there's at some point there's no words. The emotion just has to feel. So that's my geek outness as a composer. And I'll be honest, audience, everybody, I do that for every measure, and it probably drives people crazy, but I love it so much. That is my passion, is to have an audience member come in and hear the music and lose themselves in the character, because I've made so many choices that causes them to just deeply feel the journey of these characters. Again, I could go on and on forever. I care about the audience. I care about the audience experience. I care about the people on stage. I care that we all come together and join and have a beautiful, uplifting, life-changing experience together. And I want us to feel connected. And the music seems to be this magical thing that connects us all, from the history to the past to those that are seated in the seat.
Wonderful. And trying to tie in with that. So Rachel, you write all the words.
Yes.
Okay. And smithing words is never an easy thing to do.
No.
And so my question is, could you share with us, especially to this audience of reading lovers, like how some of the books or some of the research that you did, and then how you chose words like, oh, sit on your blisters and and things that just pop in. Like, what was your inspiration for some of those aspects of the creative process?
That's a great question, and it's one that touches on a lot of different things that I would love to talk about. Well, I think first of all, the language needs to be grounded in the truth of the characters and the situation, no matter what it is. And what's so great about these characters is that they're all very well documented, and many of them were writers themselves. And if they weren't, then direct quotes from them do appear in other places. And folks, this is the most beautiful book. One of the most beautiful books ever written. This is Louise Thaden's memoir. And she really has the soul of a poet as well as a pilot. And she speaks so beautifully about what flying means to her. And in fact, the moment that Lisa was just talking about on Wild Wings, it's not a direct quote from her memoir, but she does have this very beautiful and spare passage toward the beginning of the book about what it feels like to be in the air. And we talked a lot back and forth about what that needed to be. And it was pretty much all right there for me. There wasn't a whole lot that I had to do. And sit on your blisters is something that Olive Ann used to say, meaning like get yourself out of your own mess and stop complaining about it. There's this beautiful book called The Barnstormer and the Lady, which is also in that list of recommendations. And she had a lot of colorful language that she kept journals, she kept all kinds of papers about her thoughts and etiquette, the way she thought people should behave and comport themselves. And it's the little details that, I mean, I could never have come up with a phrase like sit on your blisters, or when she didn't believe something, she would say Aurora Borealis. Like, I would never have thought of that on my own, but it just seems so right. Why would I use anything else? That is who she was. And then there are other moments like, so it's not just the literature, it's also the photographs. There are plenty of beautiful photographs of both of these women and the people in their lives and the planes and blueprints and all kinds of wonderful things. And I was just thinking last night, there's this photo that I love of Blanche and Dewey kissing and wearing aviator goggles. And it's such a beautiful depiction of who they are, because it's not only romantic, but it's also kind of silly because they're wearing aviator goggles. And so I wrote this song for Dewey, Lift Off into the Heavens with Me, and it's this very sort of Cole Portery, clever thing. But then at the end, he says, "Darling, take my goggles,"
Take my goggles.
because of that photo. So that's something that I would never have thought of on my own. But seeing that image, I was like, oh, of course that's who he is, because he's very romantic and dashing, but at the same time, he's a little bit of a dork. And so once I figured that out, then I went back and rewrote that scene. Lisa, you remember you received something, and then I went back and I winnowed it way down to go, okay, well, how can we tell this as expediently as possible to make more room for music, but also show everybody what a big dork he was, in addition to being very romantic. So it's those little things that pop out to me. And then there's also, of course, the language of the period. And I'm such a huge fan of the screwball comedies of the 1930s, those films and radio plays. And I actually did go to the public library and listen to some radio broadcasts of the time, so that I could get a sense of the cadence. I mean, I think we all kind of think we know how that was, but I really needed to sit with it and listen to people of the time speaking those scripted words, so that I could really focus those Bill Royal speeches and make them sound authentic. And then of course there's just so many facts and figures. And
as a collaborator. Oh.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to compliment you and say this is why you're such why she's a gift as a collaborator, because she did the research, and what happens is when I get those speeches, she has such a sense of lyricism already that the music just pours out. I mean, Rachel is a composer also, but like it's so wonderful how deeply you research and create these characters. And oftentimes my job is to just get out of that beautiful text way, because the music language is already very embedded in it. It's
That's also the fun part about our alchemy, because I'm a composer and I have my composer brain sort of, running in the background while I'm writing lyrics so that things are structured tightly and rhyme schemes are what they're supposed to be, etc., and that there are natural rhythms of speech that pop out. But then Lisa has this incredible encyclopedic knowledge of the music of this era. And so I actually want to come back to the Pennsylvania 65000 that we were just talking about, because there's a song where Walter sings the praises of the Staggerwing Model C-17. And I wrote this, and in my mind, I was like, oh, he's strutting around, he's swaggering, like this is a cakewalk kind of a thing. And she said, Rachel, it's Pennsylvania 65000. I was like, oh, of course it is. So it sounds nothing like what I heard in my head, but it is so much more right than what I was imagining. And this is why it's so exciting that we can bounce these ideas off each other in this way.
So, and while we're continuing to talk here, if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask in the chat, we are monitoring it. So any comments or things anybody would like to make, we would love to see your ideas, see what things our conversation here might be inspiring you to ask about. And I believe one person named Leah asked us, what elements of this opera do you feel are unique to this operatic genre in contrast to musical theater? That's a question that even the singers that we have discussed through. So
I'd be curious.
I want to know what they said.
Yeah, what did they say?
Well, what did the singers say? Okay, well, I mean, so we have discussed through so in most traditional perspectives, opera is different from music theater in that there's not room for talking. Except for there's always exceptions to everything. And this is no different. What I see for this is that we are taking the classical voice and we are hoping to take a story that is American in its origins and put it into the most I'm struggling for a word here. I need the lyricist to tell the librettist.
I know. I always.
But I don't want to use the word elevate, but to enliven, to surge, to make the story, because the emotions are big and the story is a big story. And I feel like opera for this story is the perfect place for it to be, because it where the voices are bigger or warmer or richer or rounder, it helps shape the story as well. That's kind of where our perspective coming from it. So whatever you would have to add, why you said, oh, Staggerwing makes opera,
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of boundaries that are shifting. And I think that there's a lot of, boxes that we've put musical theater in and opera in and said, this is what this is, and this is what this is, that are shifting now. And I am welcome to the shift, because the question I would ask is, well, was Mozart opera or musical theater at his time?
Yes.
When you ask,
yes.
First of all, he was funny.
Mm-hmm.
He dealt, there are great, think of the Marriage of Figaro. There are great comedic moments there. His timing was comedic. So people who think that opera is only Tosca or Puccini, or it's only sung through, well, what about the Fillies of the Regiment? What about, there are operas that don't have spoken songs, spoken dialogue. And then in reverse, what is Hamilton? Because Hamilton is a musical that has an operatic structure.
I've had very long conversations with people that Hamilton is an opera.
The structure has operatic, where there's a lot of telling us instead of showing us. Same thing with Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet. So, I mean, we just write musical drama. And I feel like for me, I love working. I'll tell you this. This is as the composer working now in opera, my learning curve has been focused on expanding the power of the voice. I would say in musical theater, I had an idea of what the voice would be, and it was very about, this comedy on stage. It had a little bit more of a pop style to it. But you go back and you listen to the Rodgers and Hammerstein, and that's got so much more of the lifted voice. That's musical theater, but there's a gorgeousness to that voice. And I'm learning the difference between how to dramatically use a coloratura versus a mezzo. What is the color difference? And what is the power of these voices and the grandness of these voices? Because they are a bigger voice that take more athletically to produce the sound than a sound reinforced musical theater voice. So the challenge for me that's exciting is how to take for example, a jazz music or a comedy, which relies on timing and might be having more of a rhythmic element to it, a groove element to it. Yet how do we create this forward motion with the power of this voice? How do we make time that they've got enough breath, that they have enough time to support that voice? So that's just the fun puzzle for me as a composer. Is it musical theater and opera? Both.
I like to quote the SNL sketch from the 70s and say it's a floor wax and a dessert topping. It is. And I don't know why this is a controversial take, but for some people it is, that it's all the same thing. Like not just Staggerwing, but they're all the same thing. And the only difference is really the packaging and the style and really the marketing of it and the way that audiences' expectations are set up and managed. And actually, we have this new era where these lines are blurring, but the fact is that they were blurring 100 years ago. And well, not quite 100 years ago is this reference, but like when you think about Four Saints in 3 acts premiering on Broadway, that's insane. That would never happen now, but it's only because of marketing and the way that we expose audiences in a very limited way to these different styles and tell them what they're listening to before they actually hear it. And so that's why I say that I write operas that sound like musicals and musicals that sound like operas, because I really actually want to live in a world where there's no difference. And I think that Lisa inhabits that little Venn diagram with me as well.
And Opera Kansas too.
Well, and I would say that that's one of the joys of this commission and why I feel so important to it, because we get a chance to write something that opens up to a new audience and can push that boundary right where it matters, with audiences that care about listening to good music and music that my father would have gone to, who wasn't an opera fan. I care about everybody wanting to come, whether you are whether you are an opera person or somebody who's just, I want to hear this.
So I have to tell this story because so I have met with Mary Lynn Oliver several times, and she's the daughter of Walter and Olive Ann Beech. And her husband, Bill, is a great lover of opera. And Mary Lynn, not so much, but she's been to many all over. And she actually had, when I was talking with her one day, she said, I don't know how my parents would feel about being the subject of an opera. But to be honest, I think that they would get a kick out of it. This story and how we've framed it, I think that this is something that they would see themselves in. And I appreciate how the choices have been made to use the language of the time, to use the music of the time, because it is telling a story of the time. And I think that we can take advantage of that through this. So I appreciate you both being able to say what I was trying to say more eloquently.
Well, this gives me two things to think about. One, I think, I'm sorry. Did you want to go?
No,
Lisa?
go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I think it's important to distinguish between documentary storytelling and what we're doing, which is more of a fantasia that does dramatize the events, but it's not the same as watching a documentary. It's not the same as reading a book that has, a very distinct timeline and verbatim quotes and all of those things. Like we're doing our take on it. and making it personal, as I said. So, which you can get that from other sources, but it's just not the same. And that is the beauty of what music can do.
Right. I was just going to say, we get your hearts hooked on this story. And then I noticed there's a couple of questions about how the women pilots were selected and how they trained. That information is very much documented in some of the resource materials that we used. So, I love the idea of the arts opening up this world to the audience. We won't be able to tell everything about, all these amazing other stories we mentioned earlier, or about the full flesh out the story, but hopefully there is such an emotional connection to what they achieved that the audience goes, I want to know more. And I'm going to carry that emotion with me out of the production to learn and enrich myself, with understanding more about these women and the stories and the aviation and Kansas.
The other thing I wanted to say really quick is just shout out to Opera Kansas for structuring the competition and then subsequently this process with us in such a way that we really had a lot of room to tell the story the way that we wanted to tell it, and not to be bound by a certain stylistic restriction or or particular expectations in any way. I've definitely had commissions where it's like, we want it to sound just like this, and this, and this have to happen. But we really had a lot of room to figure it out for ourselves and just let the thing be and become what it is now. And that's really, really exciting. So thank you. I think it should always be like that.
You're very welcome. So yes, I'm excited to see that there are questions popping up here. Just a quick couple of answers here. The first one about how were these women pilots selected? That was Olive Ann. Olive Ann wanted it. And when Olive Ann Beech wanted something, when Mrs. Beech wanted something, Mrs. Beech made it happen. And so there's a whole scene in the opera that goes into great detail about how Olive Ann and Walter came to this decision to put these two aviatrixes into their plane and to encourage them and support them and get them to fly into aviation history, which is pretty much amazing. And then tapping onto that as well, another question that popped up here was, how were these women supported and raised funds, and how did they get their training? Well, Walter actually paid for Louise Thaden to learn how to fly. He was her patron, for lack of a better phrase. He recognized that she had talent and she had passion, and he supported her, and he sent her to California through Turner to make it happen. And eventually she paid him back with this, and they had a long relationship with each other. Walter and Olive Ann remained close to Louise and Blanche throughout, certainly throughout Walter's life, and throughout Olive Ann's as well. And it becomes a family. And that's also one of those things that we have been talking about within our cast is respecting the relationships, that these were real people. And there may be people here in our chat today that knew Olive Ann and Walter, and it is our great endeavor to respect and portray these people in both an artistic but also an authentic way. And so we've been excited to be involved in this and to bring this very Wichita story, this very deep aviation story to life. And we are looking forward to bringing it alive at the Kansas Aviation Museum. And someone asked a question about, are there plans for taking this outside of Kansas? Well, perhaps. There's always Opera Kansas may not do it, but it is always a great hope of any commissioner, of any composer, of any librettist, that somewhere along the way someone will see the show or hear about the show or read the score and be like, we're going to do this here. And keep watching all of our social media and all of our outlets, because there may be announcements on things such as that in the near future. So if there are any other questions that want to be asked at this point, yes, the Women's Aviation Museum is in Oklahoma City. I believe Lisa's been there.
I've been there. I have. It's fabulous. I took all kinds of pictures, and yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
And we actually are so excited. One other tidbit to add on to this, part of the reason why we chose to do this performance at the Kansas Aviation Museum is that this innovative partnership idea of doing music, intersecting with history, intersecting in a public place where you normally wouldn't expect to have an interaction with music or something of that performing arts nature. We are very excited that the Aviation Museum has recently acquired Louise Thaden's 1929 Travelair that she used to win the 1929 Powder Puff Derby race. And they are building it. Like, it is being built, rebuilt right now. It's already in the hall. If you come and see the show, you can see the Travelair. Not only can you see the Travelair, you'll be able to see the Staggerwing. It's actually a D-17 model that is in the museum, but the Staggerwing is there. And also we have a plane of Blanche Noyes as well at the Kansas Aviation Museum. So, it's great to have all of that tactile, multi-sensory experience, from your ears to your eyes, to read the information. And it's going to be an awesome experience. Staggerwing. So the plane's wings are staggered. Okay, so the one on the bottom, because it's a biplane, so it has two sets of wings, and the one on top is placed behind it by 6 inches. But this was Walter Beech's design, and there is lots of information about why he designed it this way. It's actually there's a whole kiosk about it at the Eisenhower at the airport. if you go to the airport and you're waiting for getting on a plane for United or Delta, there's a big information about it right across from the boarding gates there. So if there are any other questions, I think we're getting close to wrapping up our time. We do have one excerpt from the opera to share with everyone today. If there aren't any other questions, I think we're excited to listen to some music here this afternoon. Sarah, if you're ready to go with that. And okay, good. Yes. All right. So this excerpt is from the aria of Olive Ann Beech called When the Woman Flies. And this is part of answering that question that we just talked a little bit about how these aviatrixes were chosen for this. This is Olive Ann in her office convincing Walter that this is the right choice. And today we are presenting this to you from Georgianne Yaling is our Olive Ann Beech, and she is partnered with our pianist Vanessa Whalen. And this is cool. This is super cool because out of the world, the participants on this chat here, you're some of the very first people to ever hear this music. It is, and how often do we get to say that? How often do you get to hear something completely brand new? So as you are listening, we hope you enjoy this. We're excited about bringing this opera to our Wichita community on July 30th, 31st, and August 1st. Just as a reminder, if you're interested in coming to see the show, there's lots of information, place to buy tickets at operakansas.org. And if we're ready to go, let's hear some of this great music and these wonderful words and start sharing this story.
If a woman flies, she's more than decoration. If a woman flies,
this again. Fantastic. Excellent. We are so excited to be doing this, and we look forward to seeing all of our friends from the library and in the Wichita community to Staggerwing. And do look at our social media, Opera Kansas on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the composers are there as well. And there's much more where that came from.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, Rachel, and Ashley. Thank you all for participating in this afternoon's program. I've shared a link in the chat for you to fill out for our evaluation. And we do, like I said, read those and plan future programming based off of your comments. So please share those candidly with us. You won't hurt our feelings. If you're interested in upcoming library programs, please visit wichitalibrary.org/events for a complete calendar. And thank you again for your support of the Wichita Public Library. This ends this afternoon's program. Everyone have a great day, and hopefully you got a chance to see Staggerwing soon.